You've probably heard of the 50-30-20 rule. Maybe you watched a video about it, maybe you've read about it on an article, and maybe, just maybe, you sat there thinking, who on earth is this actually for? Because the version they teach you goes like this. Spend 50% of your income on needs, 30% on wants. Save 20%. Simple. And if your rent alone is 60% of your paycheck, they just smile and say, well, you should earn more. Right. Genius. If that advice has ever made you feel like budgeting advice wasn't made for people like you, you're not wrong. And this video is here to tell you exactly why. And then give you something that actually works. Here's something almost nobody tells you about the 50-30-20 rule. It wasn't invented by some financial genius who studied poverty. It wasn't designed for the person working 2 jobs just to make rent. It was created by Elizabeth Warren, a Harvard professor who later became a U.S. senator, and it was popularized in a book she co-wrote in 2005. The book was called All Your Worth, and the examples inside it, they assumed a household income of around $5,000 a month, after tax. Now, in 2005, in the United States, that was already above average, and it's certainly not the reality for hundreds of millions of people around the world today. Students, young workers, single parents, people on disability, people in countries where that figure is 2 or 3 months' salary, not one. The rule was not built for you. It was built for someone who already had enough breathing room to split their money 3 ways cleanly. And that's not a criticism of Elizabeth Warren. She wrote a useful framework. The problem is that the internet picked it up, stripped out all the context, and started teaching it as universal gospel, like it applied to every salary, in every country, in every cost of living situation on earth. It doesn't. And feeling like you're failing at a rule that was never designed for your life? That frustration is completely valid. But the wrong income assumption isn't even the biggest problem with how this rule gets taught. The bigger issue is the categories themselves. Specifically, what gets called a need and what gets called a want. Let's look at what most finance videos put in the wants column. The 30% you're supposed to spend on things you enjoy but don't strictly need. They list things like dining out, holidays, hobbies, streaming subscriptions, gym memberships, and then therapy. Therapy? Sitting right there between Netflix and weekend trips? Now let me ask you something honestly. If someone was dealing with severe anxiety that stopped them from sleeping, from functioning, from holding down a job, would you look them in the eye and call their therapy sessions a luxury? Something they should only do if they have 30% left over after fun money? If someone had a physical illness that needed treatment, we wouldn't put their medication in the wants column. We'd call it exactly what it is, a necessity, something that keeps them alive and functional. Mental health is not a lifestyle upgrade. For many people, it is the foundation that makes everything else possible. The job, the relationships, the ability to show up and try at all. The categories in the original rule, needs and wants, were drawn with a very specific kind of life in mind. A life where your mental health is already stable, where your physical health is covered by insurance, where you live somewhere cheap enough that rent doesn't eat you alive. But for the rest of us, the categories need to be redrawn. A gym membership for someone managing chronic pain or mental illness is not a want. A reliable internet connection for someone who works from home or studies online is not a want. A slightly better quality of food for someone recovering from an illness is not a want. Context matters. Your context matters. And any budgeting system that ignores your context will always feel like it was written for someone else's life. Because it was. So let's talk about what actually happens when someone on a low income tries to follow the 50-30-20 rule as it's been taught. Alex earns just enough to get by. After rent, the number is already terrifying. There's barely anything left. And now someone is telling Alex that out of what remains, only half should go to food, transport, bills, and anything else essential. Alex tries. Alex spreadsheets everything. Cuts back on things. Feels guilty every time something doesn't fit the percentages. Tries again next month. Fails again. Tries again. And at some point Alex stops. Not because Alex is lazy. Not because Alex doesn't care. But because following a system that doesn't fit your life doesn't feel like budgeting. It feels like punishment for not earning enough. And here is the quiet damage that does. When a financial system feels impossible, most people don't look for a better system. They just stop budgeting altogether. They tell themselves they're bad with money. They give up on saving. They assume financial stability is for other kinds of people. People with better salaries, better situations, better luck. That is the real cost of teaching the wrong rule. Not just confusion, but the complete abandonment of financial planning by the people who need it the most. You are not bad with money. You were handed a tool that doesn't fit your hand and told it was your fault when it didn't work. So what do we actually do with all of this? Here's the shift that changes everything. The 50-30-20 rule was never really about the percentages. It was about the principle behind them. And that principle is brilliant, even if the numbers don't work for your life. The principle is this: your money should be divided into 3 jobs. Things that keep you alive and functional. Things that make life worth living. And things that build your future. That's it. That's the whole idea. The 50, the 30, the 20. Those are just one example of how those 3 jobs might be split. They are not the law. They are not the only right answer. They are a starting point that was written for a specific income level in a specific country at a specific time in history. Your version might look different, and that's not failure. That's adaptation. If your necessities genuinely take 70% of your income right now, because rent is expensive, because you're supporting family, because life is just heavy at the moment, then your version might be 70, 20, 10. You cover your needs. You protect a small amount for living. You save what you can. Even 10% saved consistently is not nothing. If you save 10% of a modest income for 10 years, you will be in a fundamentally different financial position than someone who saved 0 because the right percentage felt impossible. And as your income grows, even slightly, the percentages shift. The goal is always the same: shrink the first number over time, grow the third one. Everything in the middle is yours to live on. Now, and this is important, go back to those categories. Needs and wants. Let's redraw them properly. A need is anything that keeps you functional and stable. Rent, yes. Food, yes. Transport to work, yes. But also, healthcare, including mental health. Medication. Reliable internet if your work or study depends on it. The things that are not optional for your specific life, even if they'd be optional for someone else's. A want is something that improves the quality of your life, but could be adjusted without your life falling apart. Not worthless, never worthless, but flexible. The version of the streaming service you use, where you eat when you go out, how often you buy new things. And savings, even small savings, is non-negotiable. Not because any amount is magic, but because the habit of saving, built over years, is the single most powerful financial decision a person on any income can make. The amount grows. The habit has to come first. So your rule isn't 50-30-20. Your rule is, cover your real needs. Protect a little for joy. Save whatever you honestly can. Then grow from there. Let's bring this home. The 50-30-20 rule is not bad. The idea behind it is genuinely good. But the way it's been taught, with rigid percentages, unrealistic income assumptions, and a needs versus wants split that treats therapy like a holiday, has made millions of people feel like budgeting is something that happens to other people. People with bigger salaries and simpler lives. You deserved better than that. You deserved someone to sit down and say, the rule is a guideline, not a law. Bend it, shape it, make it yours. Your budget doesn't need to look like anyone else's. It needs to reflect your income, your life, your responsibilities, and yes, your mental and physical health. Because those are not luxuries. They are the foundation that everything else is built on. Start where you are, not where the textbook says you should be. If you can only save 5% right now, save 5%. If 70% goes to survival right now, acknowledge that honestly and work with what's left. The goal is not perfection. The goal is a system that doesn't make you feel like a failure for trying. Because here is what I want you to carry with you after this video. The people who build real financial stability, over years, quietly, without dramatic income jumps, are not people who found the perfect budget. They are people who stopped waiting for the perfect income to start. They built the habit first, on the income they had, and let time do the rest. You can do the same thing. Today, with what you have right now. If this video said something that you've been wanting someone to say for a long time, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone you know is sitting with a crumpled budget sheet and thinking they're the problem. They're not. And now you can show them why.